This video is a very brief introduction to the capability approach and is the second video of a four-part series of the playlist. I start by introducing the concept of being through a media example and through a student work experience. Next, I introduce important scholars, key concepts, and important outcomes of the capability approach. Let's start with the concept of being. Imagine what it would be like to be born as an illegal person. In his podcast, Trevor Noah explains that he was born into a mixed family during apartheid, and this was what made him an illegal child. He was illegal because if you were black, you were segregated from white society. Trevor's mother is Xhosa woman, while his father is Swedish. He explains, "We were a family that couldn't be together. We were a family that, for all intents and purposes, was a crime that existed." But his journey of being and becoming continued in the United States, where he navigated the confusion of being born in a mixed family. In his routines, he discusses with comedic flair the linguistic variations, interpersonal communications, and his experiences in applying for a bank loan in the United States. At the bank, for example, they shared that he could just choose what he wanted, whether he wanted to be black or Caucasian on a bank loan application. But he later found out that he would be charged a different interest rate depending on what he selected. He also shared, "What I always admired in my mom was that she had the ability to appreciate the reality of the world she was in, but also optimistically pursue the future that she wished to exist in." To me, this is a central feature of what a student can learn to do in a strong education system and within a family with a parent that has excellent vision. In a world that is rife with inequality and systemic racism, we need to have institutions that acknowledge the challenges presented before so many students that attend our classes. But most importantly, we also need to equip students with the resources they need for flourishing futures. This ability to identify injustice and to have a vision beyond the many constraints of society are an integral part of the work of an instructor. Using the capability approach as a framework for instruction, I argue that students are better equipped to begin to understand societal constraints, inequalities, and opportunities for change. In this image, you see UWindsor student Stephanie Gonsalves. She's in the middle wearing the red dress, and she was one of many students to help bring the course Ways of Knowing and Ways of Doing to life. Steph is in her final semester of political science and modern languages here at the University of Windsor. As a student in the course Ways of Doing, she taught English to migrant workers in Leamington, Ontario. Before she could begin her work, she explored and researched the realities of the migrant workers that would attend her class. Her work was largely supported by Dr. Tanya Basek, who has been researching migrant workers for over 20 years. Dr. Basek was able to capture the realities of the migrant workers through her significant qualitative research here at the University of Windsor. Before she could begin to teach English, Steph had to understand why migrant workers came to Canada and whether or not they fulfilled their goals and/or dreams when they came to the country. She often thought critically about whether or not coming to Canada was a valuable opportunity for the migrant workers. As Dr. Basek has found and Steph learned, there were varying values and dreams achieved or lost by migrant workers. She applied the capability approach to gain a clear understanding of how goals were either achieved or missed within the temporary foreign worker project. Community members, farmers, and migrant workers have varying values and perspectives about the goals of the program. In the town, public policy discussions often center about economic outcomes for all involved. Economic outcomes, however, did not help Steph understand the needs, goals, and dreams of the migrant workers when she was developing curriculum for their classes. Steph needed to learn language that helped migrant workers to have agency about their safety, social opportunities, and working conditions. Even something as simple as going for a walk, or in the capabilitarian language, freedom of movement, needed to be discussed within the language classes. Through the course Ways of Knowing, where Steph learned the framework, and Ways of Doing, where she gained experience as an ESL teacher, she joined Dr. Basek as a research assistant and later attended 2 conferences about the capability approach, where she shared her experiences and learned the capability framework from key scholars in the network. Let's turn to some important thinkers that help develop the capability approach. Today, I'll discuss 3 scholars of significance who have taken a leadership role in developing the capability approach. Mahbub Haq, seen here on the bottom left, is a Pakistani economist who wanted better measures for the assessment of a social and economic progress of a country. For example, he pointed out that many of the countries with the strongest GDPs built and exported weapons around the world. That, to Haq, skewed the results of the GDP and therefore made the measurement a poor proxy for the well-being of a nation. Amartya Sen is an economic theorist and prolific author and Nobel laureate. He comes from an academic family and survived the partition period where he witnessed the murdering of a man who risked his life to go to work in order to provide for his family. Martha Nussbaum is a political philosopher who teaches the works at the University of Chicago Law School. She has developed a central capabilities list from her work by having studied many constitutions around the world. I will discuss her list in part 3 of the playlist. Mahbub Haq really presented the idea and the vision for the Human Development Index and the Human Development Report. He created the first Human Development Index in 1990 for the United Nations, and formerly he served as the World Bank's Director of Policy Planning and Pakistan's Finance Minister. The initial framework of the Human Development Index was centered about 3 main measurements. One would be life expectancy, another income, and literacy. Combining these 3, he felt, was a good beginning to developing a better proxy for social and economic progress of a nation. However, these frameworks were incomplete, and they struggled to find statistics that could be evenly applied throughout many countries throughout the world. The framework continues to be developed today, and we have entered now into 30 years of human development reports, and it has made significant improvements in the way that literacy, income, and life expectancy and other matters are measured in the world today. There's not enough time to talk about everything that Amartya Sen has given to the capability approach framework. However, for the purpose of this presentation, I'll discuss 5 freedoms that he presented in his book, Development as Freedom. First, political freedoms. Political freedom is the right to have a voice, the right to have a vote. He also talked about economic freedoms, having enough money to do the kinds of things and resources to do the kinds of things that you hope to do. Also, social freedoms, so measuring things like education and healthcare. And these he would view as public goods, so goods that not only benefit the individual, but also benefit society at large. He also wrote about the importance of transparency guarantees, meaning you should be able to see the books of a government. You should be able to see how much money is being spent on this or that initiative, and being able to criticize the government and to review what they're doing and their policies and to see whether or not it is functioning on the terms of its citizens. He also viewed protective securities as being important. For example, fixed institutional arrangements for the Canada Pension Plan, or statutory income supplements for those struggling with multidimensional poverty, such as employment insurance, or ad hoc arrangements for famine relief or pandemic relief, or having an organized government that can handle something like a famine or a pandemic. He was quick to point out the flaws of the GDP, and while he wasn't the first, he was most likely more articulate than most. Here's a quote from a John F. Kennedy speech many years ago. In his address, he shares that our gross national product now is over $800 billion a year, but that gross national product, if we judge the United States of America by that gross national product counts air pollution and cigarette advertising and ambulances to clear our highways of carnage. It counts special locks for our doors and the jails for the people who break them. It counts the destruction of the redwood and the loss of our natural wonder in chaotic sprawl. It counts napalm and counts nuclear warheads and armored cars for the police to fight the riots in our cities. It counts Whitman's rifle and Speck's knife and the television programs which glorify violence in order to sell toys to our children. Yet the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry or the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate, or the integrity of our public officials. It measures neither our wit nor our courage, neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything, in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. And it can tell us everything about America, except why we are proud that we are Americans. A lot of people refer to OECD countries or the G7 as so-called developed countries because while they are taking kudos for the GDP, they are also creating other issues within the world by selling armaments to other countries. Amartya Sen, like JFK, points out that the principal suppliers of armament in the world market today are the G8 countries, which were responsible for 84% of the arms sold in the period between 1998 and 2003. Japan, the only non-Western country among the G8, is also the only one among them that abstains from this trade. Let's discuss a few key concepts of the capability approach. First, we're going to talk about how the capability approach views equality. Capabilitarians tend to be most interested in studying inequality in terms of deprivation. What are the worst deprivations and what are the best investments that we can make to mitigate those extreme deprivations? So it's more than measuring just financial deprivation, but it's also measuring the values and choices that people make. For example, if 3 people hadn't eaten for 3 days, some of them may have been starving, while others may have been fasting. And so that is one of the primary differences between a functioning and a capability. Additionally, when we talk about deprivations, distribution becomes highly important. When you are distributing food for people in the middle of a pandemic or that are starving, you need to examine the caloric intake of a pregnant woman versus a small child or a growing teen. They all have different caloric needs. When we explore functionings, we're really talking about beings. What are you able to be? Are you able to be well nourished? Are you able to be literate? Are you able to be clothed? Are you able to be healthy? Some functionings go beyond basic life needs. They can include things like playing a virtuoso drum solo, going for a walk, going for a swim, or eating fine food. Capabilities, however, are the substantive freedoms he or she enjoys to lead the kind of life he or she has reason to value. While lots of money means you can buy lots of things, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have access to all capabilities. We need to recognize that money is only a means, not an end. Capabilitarians are also very interested in the idea of agency. You need to learn how to advocate for self and others. In this case, Steph often discussed the need to advocate for the migrant workers who could not always advocate for themselves, and migrant workers also struggle to navigate for others and their own peers. Not being able to help others or not being able to have agency to help others is the kind of deprivation that can create large inequalities within a society. Amartya Sen often used the bicycle as an example of a resource that could be given to people in a society. He said that it could be a resource, just something that they could use. It could be a functioning. So if the resource was the bicycle, the functioning might be something like mobility. The capability would be just to go for a ride and have fun and to take the opportunity to do so. But he also talked about conversion factors. Conversion factors matter greatly when you're distributing resources. For example, some personal conversion factors include, when you're distributing food, metabolism, physical condition, sex, reading skills, or intelligence. Do you have the ability to cook the food? Do you have the ability to read a recipe to cook the food? And how much caloric intake do you need? And what kind of health do you have before you have the resource come to you? Social conversion factors include other things such as public policies, social norms, practices that unfairly discriminate, societal hierarchies, or power relations related to class, gender, race, or caste. So, for example, in Trevor Noah's case, social conversions for him, being able to have the ability to go for a bank loan or to go for a walk in apartheid South Africa, was much more of a difficult social conversion. Environmental conversion factors could be the physical or built environment in which a person lives. For example, if I gave you a bike in the middle of a Nunavut winter, you might not get very good use of that bicycle. Some examples of environmental conversions include climate, pollution, proneness to earthquakes, presence or absence of seas and oceans. These also include infrastructure such as buildings, roads, bridges, transportation, and communication. When you're leading a group and you're giving out resources or you're giving out opportunities, it's important to identify the conversion factors that each one of your team members is dealing with as you go to achieve your goals. As you can see, the world is a complex place and is becoming increasingly complex, and there is a frustration, as has been acknowledged by The Economist magazine in a recent publication about populism, and that is that there are simple solutions to things like migration, like building a wall. And these simple solutions fall short. Using the GDP as a proxy for measuring well-being falls well short of an appropriate measurement to measure well-being. Please join me in the next section to see how people are measuring well-being in the world.